The goal of this show is to help you break in and thrive in advertising. And we do that every single week by sharing the stories and advice of those rocking it on the other side. And every once in a while, we work with agencies to craft an agency break-in, a deep dive into what it's like to work at top agencies and why CMOs should take notice. For this special agency break-in series, we're featuring M+C Saatchi North America. They're a global creative solutions company built to help brands navigate complexity, connect with culture, and move at the speed of today's consumers. And let's clear something up. This is not Saatchi and Saatchi. M+C Saatchi North America is an independent, globally recognized network of specialist agencies that brings together creative, consulting, media, and data expertise to help brands thrive. Over the next 3 days, we're bringing you exclusive conversations with M+C Saatchi North America's leadership, giving you an inside look at their creative philosophy, agency culture, and how they've differentiated in a crowded industry. You're going to hear from their regional MD for influencer engagement and culture, their regional chief creative officer, and their CEO over the next 3 days. But we're going to kick things off with Alexandra Osorio, but we're going to call her Alex. As Regional Managing Director of Influencer Engagement and Culture, Alex leads M+C Saatchi's approach to influencer marketing and brand partnerships, helping clients build cultural power through authentic connections. We're going to learn how brands can show up authentically in culture through influencers and creators. This is the future. We got to listen to this stuff. And why community-based influence is the key to engagement in today's digital world, the biggest mistakes brands make when working with creators and how to avoid them, and what aspiring advertising professionals should know about breaking into the influencer space. So she's worked on major agency of record wins like Jaguar Land Rover, Samsonite, Marriott Bonvoy, and more. Today, she's here to share how M+C Saatchi North America is redefining influencer marketing for brands. And if you want to learn more about working with M+C Saatchi North America, you can visit their website or email isabella.pierangelo at mcsaatchi.com. And I'll put that in the show notes as well. Now let's get into it. This is the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast, and as usual, I'm your accomplice, Gino Schellenberger. Kick it, Mikey. All right, Alexandra Osorio, or Alex you prefer to go by. Alex, how are you doing today? Welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm doing wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Of course. We've been here for a couple of days now exploring what it's like to work at M+C Saatchi. We want to understand what it's like to work here, and then for brands, what it's like to work with all of you as an agency partner. So it's been a lot of fun. I need to know about you, your role here, what you're up to, all of your insights, and maybe some advice for the aspiring advertising professionals, maybe some advice for the brands out there. How does that run a show sound?
That sounds wonderful.
Wonderful. Let's kick it and tell us about you outside of work. What are you up to?
Oh, I am, as I call it, a student of all things wellness and well-being.
Okay.
And I think after living in New York City for 15 years and a lot of time spent on the agency side, it's high pressure, it's quick. So I try to balance all of that lifestyle with things that sort of help ground me, give me a clear head, better understand how to manage pressure. Yoga, meditation. So those are truly, like, if I talk about what I do outside of work, it's things that are the antithesis to the noise, right? That sometimes marketing can be. It's sort of spaces that ground you, give you a clear head, allow you to step into work and feel ready for whatever's going to get thrown at you.
Incredible. What's like an easy way for me to start, for somebody else to start if they're breaking in this industry, they're working in this industry? How can they easily, so it's not stressful to get involved in this space? Like, what's the easiest first step?
You mean to kind of care for yourself?
Yes.
I would just say learn how to breathe. It's the greatest tactic, like a box breath. I use it all the time, right? You get an email. You're like, oh, no, I can't do it today. You just take a deep breath, release it out, and it just kind of gives you a moment of reprieve. So learn how to breathe.
Incredible.
That's the easiest thing to say.
And it's probably so good for the longevity of your career in advertising to be able to stay within it so long and be successful in it, because burnout, stress is a common factor that people want to switch out. They go to brand side, they start their own thing, which is even more stressful, or they do other stuff. They tend to leave the industry.
Exactly. I'm a big proponent of, right, regardless of what career you're in, and particularly one that might be high stress, figure out the things that are important to you and build tools and systems to support that. And I think for me, a big piece of that is always creating space either in the morning or the evening to decompress. It's the way that I find, like, when things come at me fast, I can slow things down so I feel like I'm making critical decisions better. So I feel like it's one of those things that improves my quality of life, but it also just makes me better at my job.
Right.
Which I think is, like, you got to figure out the tools and the systems that support that for anyone's career, right? Because there's just a lot going on in the world. It's super stressful. It's very loud. So find those spaces for yourself.
Got it. I love it. Decompressing is so important before, after work. I think that's fantastic. So let's learn more about your role then at M+C Saatchi. Tell us what you're up to, what's the title, and we'll dive into all of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lengthy title. It's a lot of marketing words. I'm Regional Managing Director of Influencer Marketing and Culture, which essentially means for the region, and then I also sort of support a bit of the global vision as well. How do we use influencer marketing on behalf of our clients to create what is our new proposition, cultural power for our clients? So it's basically, it's as simple as that. It's how do we show up in culture in meaningful, impactful ways? How do we partner with creators to do that? And how do we give meaning and vision behind that? Something that can both inspire our clients, but also be actionable and deliver business outcomes.
Absolutely. And tell us why this matters, because we know that influencers are all the rage with the rise of TikTok, social media. They're prominent right now, but what do you see as, like, the value in partnering with, like, influencers and the right way to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. There's kind of three pieces, right? They're important because it's the way we consume information, right? Like, most people are consuming information on social media, and social media is quite literally kept alive by creators themselves, right? And the content that they produce. So I feel like it's just the ecosystem that we're operating in, right? This digital ecosystem, this content-driven ecosystem. I think creators are real-world storytellers, right? And they're people that are hyper relatable. So if you find the right people in the right spaces that really represent what you're trying to say, you can tell an incredibly authentic story on behalf of your brand that is way more compelling than if a brand was just speaking to you from a brand voice, right? So sort of this idea, like, in this content ecosystem, we basically get a bunch of people who are real life people telling our story on behalf of a brand, and I think that can be incredibly powerful when done right. And I think the way we do it, right, which is something I'm critically, I value, is doing it authentically, right? And how we talk about it is we kind of have it a community-based approach. So if you're thinking about this digital ecosystem, how are people spending time online? They're spending time online around the things that they care about the most, right? What they're passionate about. So if we really look at our target audiences and say, okay, what communities are they naturally living in? And then who are those creators that also live in those communities? They make sense, right? Particularly if they align with our brand to tell stories within those communities. Then we become authentic in the way we communicate. We become ingratiated into those communities instead of just sort of above the line advertising, right? We're saying, okay, we care about the same things that you care about, and we're actually talking through people who are natural storytellers that are super relatable to you.
What, like, micro communities are you involved with, would you say, personally speaking? What's your algorithm like? Who are you following?
Oh my gosh, I'm so basic. This is like when I say I'm like my personal. I love fashion, so it's one of those things that fashion will always get me, and I am obviously going to age myself. I am of a generation that loves sort of street style, so the more sort of individualized fashion I really find interesting. Design. I love design communities online. There's so much visually arresting content that I just think, like, sucks me in. And then, of course, like, travel content.
Okay.
Admittedly high-end travel content.
If you were to create, if a brand wanted to target, like, somebody like you, who would be the influencer that they should talk and work with?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. One of my favorite people, which I have to give him a shout out, his name's Dion Hinton. He's a lovely human inside and out. He has such a gorgeous aesthetic and such a beautiful heart in the way he communicates, that he's somebody, particularly as a multi-platform creator, that I really appreciate, because what he delivers on Instagram is this, like, seamless aesthetic content, right? That is, like, fashion design, absolutely stunning, sort of a reductionist design philosophy. But then on YouTube, he has these like really personal and vulnerable testimonials that I just find like really moving. It's, you get to know him. And then obviously that's like the combination. TikTok is very different as well. So I think the combination of how his sort of, you know, personal point of view, but also his aesthetic and his, as a cultural curator, particularly comes across multi-platform as something that really resonates with me.
That's
I'm
awesome.
also a bird nerd.
Bird
FYI.
nerd.
So bird content, I'm no longer on X, but bird content, 100%. You'll always get me. I also work for an animal welfare organization. So like some elephants, some big cats, all day long. Like some puppy dogs.
Yeah.
I'm a sucker.
Hey, I love it. So you kind of touched upon the identification process. So just in high level reviewing what we talked about, you're helping like the clients of M+C Saatchi like select and identify which influencers to work with on a campaign potentially, right?
Potentially, yeah.
Right.
Well, and I think one of the things about my role, right, is it's sort of a step up from that. I think a lot of times brands have approached it as a channel strategy versus actually having sort of a more senior strategic voice at the table to think about, okay, it's not just creators at a media channel, but how do we really think about their ability to function across a full marketing ecosystem? How do we use them, again, to create cultural power, not just to put out content on behalf of our brand? So I do think that's one of the vision behind this role, and obviously in partnership with our clients, is to think strategically,
right,
rather than more focused on a channel strategy.
Love that. That helps a lot, because I was going to ask them, what are some of those like mishaps or mistakes or just common errors that you've seen or heard about with influencers and brands that we should know?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. Lack of transparency, right, on both sides of the equation. I think we're trying to build a relationship, so it makes the most sense when we're just open and honest with one another, because that also allows us to continue to partner. It's the longevity for both sides that I think is incredibly important for equity, right, in the sense of creators aren't just partnering with a bunch of brands and brands aren't just partnering with a bunch of creators. It's like we're really building authentic connections. So I think transparency is sort of foundational for that. And I think the one that everyone hears, but it's true, is the brand control of things, right? Like you are using creators, understandably, like when you have a very clear brief to creators, there are things that you're trying to accomplish as a business. Be open and honest about that. But when you sort of over-edit a creator's voice and or over-message them, you're creating inauthentic content that is just not going to perform as well. It's just brass tacks. It's not going to perform as well. Right. So I think that's the biggest thing, is finding this delicate balance within that relationship, right? And being open and honest of like what you need as a brand in a business, what you're trying to communicate, but then also giving a lot of space to the creator for them to do what they do best, which is create content. They understand their audience. They understand how it's going to resonate. Got it.
So the whole thing is creating cultural power, right? That's like what the strategy, the positioning statement that I've heard a couple times here.
Yep.
So to summarize this, what's your role? Like, how is your role helping your clients achieve cultural power?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. Essentially, creators are foundational to that, right? Not just in the awareness that they give, but the credibility that they build. So if you are a business or a brand that's trying to build a level of cultural power and influence, right, the way people are making decisions or living or essentially shaping in real time, if you're not using creators to do that, you're basically missing out on a whole opportunity, a digital ecosystem to both drive awareness around your brand, build credibility as well.
Love it. So I want to talk now about how you've been successful. Like, you've led major AOR wins for brands like Jaguar, Land Rover, Samsonite, Marriott Bonvoy.
Yeah.
These are incredible wins. So you're working with some big brands here. In your eyes, what are brands looking for today when it comes to influence and cultural strategy, and how are you helping deliver that? Like, what are they actually saying? Maybe not these specific brands, what you're in your feed and your algorithm, what's the trend?
Yeah, I think what clients are looking for is a true partner to help them unpack what sometimes feels like a very large and convoluted landscape. So I think where we're winning is really being thoughtful and strategic about how we go about that and being a strategic partner from the outset. So I always say to my team, it's not about partnering with the coolest, it's partnering with who's the most strategic. So we really start with brands to say, okay, what are we trying to achieve, right? You can drive awareness, you can drive cultural credibility, you can play lower funnel, right, for conversion when you're talking about creators. So like, where do we want to build our focus, and then how do we really build a strategy together that executes that? I think the other piece that is always a big consideration is casting. And I think in the broad, all of the agencies, right, that exist, there's a lot of people that are touching creator marketing in different forms or fashions. I think we always start with the strategy and think about then and the communities we're trying to talk to, right, as part of that strategy, and the story we're trying to tell, and then we really find the people that are best suited to partner versus having just a pool of people that we always pull from. It always starts with strategically what we're trying to accomplish and who fits it best.
Absolutely. It's just like any sort of like campaign strategy. You need to start with the overall strategy, not the tactics. Like it's just a common mistake that I see with aspiring advertisers make. Let's come up with a bunch of like tactics, and it doesn't really work out. Like it's like all then you reverse engineer and it doesn't come clean. It's like a Frankenstein. Yeah.
You nailed it. And it's the thing that, we were kind of talking about it before, a peek behind the curtain, but when you slide into somebody's DMs and you're like, hey, could you post this for me? A lot of people see it tactically versus really understanding the power you can wield when you use creator marketing strategically and smartly.
What do you think? Let's talk about the future of this stuff, because it's relatively new. It's shifting a lot. I think there's AI influencers out there. I mean, Jack, our business partner, he's kind of AI-ish. There's micro communities and real-time shifts.
Why is Alex laughing so much?
I don't know. I'm like, AI-ish. Are you half human, half like
robotic? He's a little robotic. What do you see? Do you have anything to say there, Jack?
I was gonna say a couple things, but that makes no sense.
She laughed.
I know, but
she's still laughing.
I've never seen an AI influencer. Like, I've never interacted with one though.
Got it.
Have you?
No.
Have you?
I mean, not partnered with them, but I've seen their content.
There you go.
I've never.
They're out there.
They're out there, just like Star Trek. They are out there.
So it's shifting. What do you see as the biggest shift happening right now, and how should brands be thinking about it when it comes to this influencer space?
Yeah, I think you named a bunch of really, really big ones. I think probably one of the things that I find most interesting, and I would just say, me personally, what I'm watching in this space is obviously the White House. Its press corps is no longer its press corps. They've basically said, legacy media outlets out, creators in. And so I do think there's this shift in tide, particularly around news creators, where there's a different level of access, right, in the way that they report the news, even though they're political pundits. So I think there's just a lot of sort of in this shift, right, there's going to be a lot of responsibility in understanding what those channels mean and how you thoughtfully communicate with your audience, right? And I think there's got to be a little bit of course correction that happens there in some capacity, right? Both from the consumer and how they receive that information, and then in creators that actually deliver it. So there's AI, we can list all of the different trends, micro communities, all of those things, but I do think there's something that is really interesting to watch around what's happening with news creators and the way that they're influencing and shaping a public narrative, particularly around government, this is sort of really one of the first times we had to grapple with it at that scale. Yeah.
I mean, I knew before a lot of people were getting their news on Twitter and social media, and now it's like those influencers have this space too, just to share the news and react to it. And it might not be always correct or whatever. There might be issues with that. I mean, we tell news now, on our platform, about the ad industry.
Absolutely.
But we see that power it has. People are interacting with it. It's faster. It's a little bit more funny. So it does have some power there.
Yeah, your voice matters, and you're reporting the news about an industry, and you can add a different tenor, right? That's the value of democratizing the way we approach storytelling.
Yeah.
But there is power that is wielded there, right? So I do think that there is a bit of reckoning that's going to happen over the next couple of years in a way, particularly around the way sort of the public narrative is shaped, which is nothing new. It's just something obviously based off the back of a recent announcement I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Niche and micro communities, I think, are going to continue to be critically important, right? I think they have the most, when we talk about moving culture, macro pays attention to nano and micro, right? What are, I always say your favorite rapper is four tiers down on what they're listening, right? Because they're trying to pay attention what's up and coming in the space. It happens in almost every cultural vertical, in fashion and otherwise. So I think people often, and this is something I see a lot on the brand side, is, you know, people say they want to build cultural credibility, but they aren't really willing to relinquish or balance the brand awareness metric or the reach that they're looking for what it actually takes to galvanize community at the nano and macro level and really build from people as they're building their careers.
I love that. So you've worked across luxury, automotive, fashion, media, and consumer brands, I guess.
And a nonprofit.
And a nonprofit. Toss that in there. So what separates the brands that do influencer marketing right from those that just check the boxes across some of these industries?
Yeah, they genuinely contribute to culture, right? It is not just about taking and trading off the cultural equity that either creators or celebrities or other people have built. It's also about giving back to the community. So it's, I mean, I can say it in the most tactical way, but it's, you know, instead of just asking somebody, putting out a content brief, right, and saying, hey, let's co-produce some content together around a story that I want to tell. Maybe that's how your business relationship initiates, but then you're like, hey, what are you up to? Like, do you have a gallery showing this week? Is there anything that you need support on? Or it's that mutual back and forth that you're really saying, okay, as much as there's a transaction happening here, but as much as I'm asking you for your cultural credibility to tell our stories, I also want to contribute to your ability to continue to build culture and contribute to those communities in a meaningful way. So it's that reciprocal relationship that I think is super defining.
I do love that. Then it's very obvious that you know your stuff here, but for brands listening, why should they work with M+C Saatchi to shape their influencer and cultural strategies?
It's always a hard one, right? I mean, look, I hope there's chemistry always, right? Outside of like the hard sell, like I hope people walk in and feel like they want to be in the trenches with us every day solving their marketing and business challenges. That we are people that, you know, feel like trusted partners, that we're going to ask the hard questions, but that we're also going to show up when it's just time to move. I think that that's a bit of the ethos that we really try to build, is just like, yeah, we want to be partners from the beginning. As far as like a proposition is concerned, I think that we are really all about, and I think that's what differentiates us, and I'm going to say it again, but it is the community building aspect. I think we do it best in class in the sense of how we really thoughtfully identify where your audiences sit, what communities they operate in, and which creators have the most equity. And that, I think, is really important in the way that we allow our clients to show up authentically in culture, which I feel like is paramount from a data-driven point of view to actually building any sense of cultural power, in addition to pulling all the other levers, right, that the group and marketing allows.
Yeah. How does that integration work then with other capabilities? Like, can you speak about that across the different agencies within M+C Saatchi?
Yeah. I mean, the way it works is you sit around a table, right? I think it's so, I always joke that, like, you know, it always comes down to like email, a list, like tactically what it looks like is. But as far as integration, I think what we do is we try to say, okay, what problem are we trying to solve, and who are the right brains in the room to solve it? And so when my discipline is a right brain in the room to solve it, I will sit in the room with all of our incredible leaders across the business and say, all right, how do we solve this together? Because I think at our core, we're all strategists. So even if we have a level of specialty, we're all sitting around the room strategizing in how we solve a business outcome, and then saying, okay, I actually have this literacy that I can bring to the table as part of this broader solution. Here's what I'm thinking.
That's incredible.
But functionally, it's like, do your research, right? Have the data and insights to back it up. And then start to strategically kind of build that together. And to be honest, there's not a lot of people that are walking through the door in 2025 who aren't asking for creator to be a foundational part of that.
There we go. So it's definitely a growing discipline for those that want to break into this realm within advertising. What advice do you have for them?
Oh my gosh, be internet obsessed. Like, just be culture obsessed is the best way to say it. And I think being culture obsessed, really understanding like what you're passionate about and understanding how those communities operationalize. Like, my team is built out of people that all have distinct interests, from like indie music to needle pointing. I'm not kidding. Like, I walked in the office today, and one of my one of the women on my team who I absolutely adore, she was just like, I'm into brooches. And I'm like, yeah, that's a thing. But also, like, look at the Oscar red carpet. Every man had a brooch on, right? So it's sort of those things, like, don't ever underestimate your thirst and interest in culture and come thirsty to the table, because that's always going to fuel your ability to work in a space like creator marketing. And I feel like also the advice is don't be afraid to be yourself, because I build teams, obviously high functioning teams, to service our clients, but I'm also really looking at the chemistry fit, what people do, what they're interested in, even from entry level positions, because at the end of the day, you're going to come in and we're going to train you how to do the thing that you're going to do if you're breaking in. But if you come, ready to contribute, endlessly interested about culture, and obviously social media obsessed, it doesn't hurt.
Interesting. I was thinking Claire could do that. She's pretty good at that. One of our
Tell me about this Claire.
Claire's awesome. She helps us out with our podcast in the back end, and she's just graduating now. I was talking with her, and she loves being on her phone.
Yeah.
She's our social media.
Yeah, social
person.
media.
So she, she's on her phone 24/7, and it's like that you're doing the thing you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And just always online, chronically online. She posts all the time from her personal account.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
And that's like, look, and I don't post at all, but I'm online, and my team is like, they know what immediately what's happening on TikTok. They'll come in and, have you said this, or have you seen this? And like feeding into that, more so in this space, which is what I love about it, is like that conversation around culture always has to exist.
Yep.
So I love that they come ready to talk about those bits and pieces, because to be honest, it fuels the work. It makes it really relevant. It makes it cutting edge. It makes it interesting.
I love it. Anything else that we didn't cover that you want the people know about?
No, I mean, was this interesting?
Very. Learned a lot.
I mean, it is, the only thing I will say is I didn't come from this background. I was born out of politics. I was born out of strategy. I was born out of comms. Like I said, I've had a varied background, but what I have such a heart for is not just like why this is the now, right, the modernity of it, but how you get to work with the best people. Like, creators are creative, they're human, they're incredibly authentic, their work ethic is insane. Like, there's just such, when you get to work with creators, we talk about it as this idea, but what it is this collection of incredibly inspirational and creative individuals that you have the potential to meet and partner with on a daily basis. And that is really what has always drawn me to this space, is the human aspect.
Golden. Well, it makes me interested, so I know everybody else is going to be as well. So
I have a question.
Jack has a question.
I have maybe an answer.
I have a question. So we talked about it, the idea of like brands trying to get too much of their message across with a creator when they do like a sponsored post. And like we've talked to a lot of creators as well, and that's like their biggest ick, if you will, is, I got this brief. They said I had creative control. I went to go make it. Didn't have as much creative control as I thought I did.
Yep.
What is like is there a good framework or a good way of living from a brand's point of view when it comes to like knowing how much creative control to give, that balance of like, I want my message to come across, but I don't want it to sound robotic and inauthentic?
Yep.
Or is it just like all art, no science?
No, it is. I think it comes down to being, and this is also on agencies like us who broker these deals, is being incredibly rigorous about the brief. And from a brand point of view, really being clear about what you want out of this, like what's critically important and what's the space for creativity, and leaning into those hard lines. And so even when we manage the process, oftentimes, right, and this is the reality on the brand side, they're not living the creator experience. So we as brokers have to be like, okay, these are actually things like when you go through their feed is foundational to the way that they speak to their audience or how they present information. So we don't want to remove that, or we don't want to push back on that, because that is the creative space to play that we allowed for in the original brief. Yep. And a lot of times brands will be like, oh, but this, because, right, there's a bunch of stakeholders, right, that see one piece of creator content that you've spent $10,000 on, and everyone wants to get the most out of it, right? So I think from that end, like, we do have to help broker that. What I would say for the creator side is just to say, all right, what is critically important here, right? these are the things that matter for me. This is where I will allow for pushback, and that allows for a bit of a conversation, more so a conversation. So I think that's how we kind of meet in the middle, and what we try to do is like, hey, brands, be super clear from the outset on the brief, because you're just going to ruin relationships when there's slippage there, right? Or there's a lack of clarity. We always ask, make sure you have a clear set of stakeholders that are reviewing who all understand the project from the beginning. So what they're weighing in on is actually against the original brief that we put forward. And then if there's something that makes you uncomfortable or you feel like, oh, I want this, like, let's talk about whether that's actually critically important to the outcome of what you're trying to accomplish, versus just trying to get what you can. And then we always say to creators, like, all right, meet us halfway, right? What matters to you, and then what are some things that will reshape? We're not asking for a reshoot. We're just saying, what are some things that we could potentially do here to make it a little bit more impactful and kind of broker? And that's where we fall into place, I guess.
Awesome. I have one follow-up question.
Please.
The other thing you talked about earlier is like this idea of a pool or a roster of creators versus also like fitting into a certain strategy.
Yeah.
What's your recommendation for kind of building that? Because there's going to be like a roster inherently of like people that you know. Is there a strategy that goes into building that or finding those people? Because my worry would be like, my algorithm is my algorithm. So I'm not exposed to all these different, especially if you're working in like a micro community. What would be your strategy there to make sure you get outside of just your team's algorithms to try and find those micro communities?
It's totally fair. I always say, and this is like so old school, classic desktop research. No tool is going to outdo you going into the Reddit threads, like the verified followership of people that like feel like-minded, or like going out and reading proper news outlets, like people that are reporting on niche communities or trending communities. Substack can also be a great resource to understand, right? So I think that's what I always try to do, is like just do the desktop research. And sometimes even with like, we always say like a good way to kind of like, all right, we have this person in our head, right, that we've worked with a couple of times. We want to diversify. We want to find people that might be like-minded in some way, but that has their own vibe. Let's go through who they're following. Let's understand who's verified. Let's who understand. And then we kind of like document from there. So it is really, as much as like to the conversation, AI and all the tools, like they add value, but if you're really trying to be a contributor in creative culture, you just got to be in it. And so I think that's a critical way to go about it.
Golden. How can people reach out to you? They want to ask you further questions.
Now I have to be like, DM me on Instagram, don't
I? Yeah.
No, you can reach out to me on my email. I'm always, literally anyone is welcome to reach out to me. Also on LinkedIn, Alexandra Osorio, or alex.osorio@M+C Saatchi.com.
Golden.
Open inbox.
Alex, thank you so much for sharing your story, your insights here. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is really wonderful.